someone whose voice I have been informed by and inspired by now for many years, who has spoken and continues to speak into the difficult and even challenging places as it relates to life in America, international concerns, and how, again, our spirits can be sustained in struggle. His brilliance is visible in the pages of Tikkun magazine on a regular basis. His voice and leadership extends far and wide. And I'm just excited about hearing from him this afternoon. Won't you welcome Rabbi Michael Lerner?
Actually, I'd love to do another stretch. I want to ask everybody to stand for again. But this time, the spiritual gathering, let's at least sing one little song together, okay? And since I wanted to hand out pieces of paper, but then it's an environmentally sound and so forth, so I'll take something that I hope many of you know. It goes like this. I'm gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the rivers. I'm gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside, study war no more. I ain't gonna study. I ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study. I ain't gonna study war. Now this time move your bodies too. Gonna lay down my sword way down, down by the riverside, way down, down by the, said way down, down by the, I'm gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside, study war no. I ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study no more. I ain't gonna study war more. I ain't gonna study. I ain't gonna study. I ain't gonna study war no more. Now this time, the third and last time, arms around each other. I'm gonna lay down my sword and shield way down. Way down, down by, way down by the river. I'm gonna start down my, way down, down by the river. Oh, study no more. I ain't gonna study war 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 no more. All right. Hey. Okay. Have a seat. I have to say, I'm very proud to say here, I was so moved this morning by the the speaker who apologized for her own community of white Christians who have voted in the Trump administration. I want to say that I'm very proud to be a part of a community of Jews who don't think of ourselves as white. We don't think of ourselves as white, who voted 70% for Hillary Clinton, 70%. Next to African Americans, the largest percentage of people not voting for Trump of any of the constituencies that you can think of in the United States. So, and I'm also proud, very, very proud, to be a friend and ally of Marianne Williamson, whom I've learned so much from. Wonderful, incredible leader. And thank you so much, Marianne, for having me here. Got a lot of stuff to talk about because we have a lot of, we've been talking about things that unite us and things that we share and what we can do together, but we need a strategy. We need a strategy. We need not only to say each of us needs to bring the good energy here, we also need to have some strategic orientation. So I'll start with this. In my experience, I started being an activist in the liberal and progressive world in 1964. I'm about to turn 74 next week, and what I have seen, beautiful, incredible, wonderful energy, but at the same time some problems. I'm going to talk about some of those. But one of them is that we have so many individual silos. People are working on immigration rights, and they're not connected to the people who are working on environmental sanity. And people who are working on environmental sanity are not connected to these anti-racist struggles. And anti-war people aren't necessarily linked in to the struggle for human rights in other parts of the world. And it just goes on and on. Each group really doing beautiful work, but in individual silos. And so one of the first things that is necessary is to bring all of these different groups to some kind of togetherness. Now, I know that some kind of togetherness is not going to result very quickly in a specific organization to unite everybody. There's too many people who are, let's say, attached to their fundraising projects, their way of keeping their organization going, et cetera. It's not going to be easy to bring these groups together. But what we're saying is we need to have at least a common vision. You know, Martin Luther King Jr. did not become an icon of social change by giving a speech to some 300,000 people in 1963 in Washington, D.C., the March on Washington. I was there. He did not give a speech saying, "I have a complaint." The liberal and progressive forces are great on their list of complaints. We need a vision of the dream that we share. What is the dream, the common dream? Well, I want to say in a simple formulation of it, that I'd like to see us try to convince every one of the specific organizations or movements that you're part of to also share, not to eliminate their own particularity and their own particular focus, but to also share this. That we need, and this goes like this, we need a new bottom line in the United States and in fact in the world. A new bottom line that says the following. The old bottom line said that you judge efficiency, productivity, rationality in our corporations, in our economic system, in our political system, in our educational system, virtually every part of the society, you judge it by how much money or how much power gets accumulated. That's the old bottom line. We need a new bottom line. And the new bottom line should say that we want to judge efficiency, productivity, and rationality by how much that institution, that economic system, that political system, that educational system maximizes people's capacities to be loving and caring, kind and generous, ethically and environmentally sensitive, enhances our capacity to respond to other human beings as embodiments of the sacred, and enhances our capacity to respond to the universe, not as a commodity to turn into something to sell, but with awe and wonder and radical amazement at the grandeur of this universe. Get every organization, get every movement that you're part of to begin to articulate that. And people will suddenly understand more of what it is that we're for and not what we are just against. So I want to ask you to become activists and do this first step. Go into social change movements and ask them to adopt the new bottom line, not to replace all the other things, but to add it on so that people know that wherever they go in the liberal and progressive world, they're hearing one thing that unites them, that one line, that 10-second soundbite, okay? That one line that makes it possible for people to see what it is that we really want. We want a world of love and caring and kindness and generosity and ethical and environmental sanity and awe and wonder at the grandeur of the universe and treating other human beings as embodiments of the sacred. That's what we want. You see what I'm saying? Okay? But we have to bring that. So here, wherever you go into movements. Okay, and this is part of a theme that I'm going to talk about a little bit more today, because there's a big problem in a strategy, and that big problem has to do with the liberal and progressive world. So before I go there, I just want to say two things that we in the network of spiritual progressives, parentheses here. Now, what's a spiritual progressive? A spiritual progressive is not necessarily somebody who believes in God, or not necessarily somebody who believes in any religion. In fact, we welcome fundamentalist atheists are also welcome into our network of spiritual progressives. A spiritual progressive is somebody who affirms that new bottom line. If you affirm that new bottom line, you're a spiritual progressive. Please join the network of spiritual progressives, because we're going to do something together. Now, so we've put forward as examples of what it would look like to have that new bottom line in place, two concrete programs that I want to tell you about. The first one is called the ESRA, the Environmental and Social Responsibility Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And here's what it says. Here's what it says. There are several points to the ESRA, so let me get them out. Number one, it says, all elections on the national and state level must be publicly funded and no other money allowed. This is different than there are other people, the move to amend people, a number of other people with amendments, they are inadequate. Each one of them gives power to Congress to decide how much each every 2 years. What's the limit? No money from any source other than public funding, okay? Only public funding and no other monies allowed. Okay, that's point number one. Point number two, you'd think, okay, is that getting money out of politics? No, why not? Because corporations have been able to threaten localities and say, we're going to move our corporations out of here if you don't allow us to continue to pollute, or if you don't allow us to continue to not pay high enough wages and so forth. And many localities have capitulated to that, because not because they are worshiping corporations, but because they care about their own working people and they want them to have jobs. And if those corporations can do it, can move out. So here are the next 2 points. The second point of the ESRA says the following: every corporation with incomes above $50 million a year. So we're not talking about local mom and pop operations, not small corporations. Every corporation with incomes above $50 million a year must get a new corporate charter once every 5 years, right? And that will only be granted to those that can prove a satisfactory history of social and environmental responsibility to a jury of ordinary citizens, okay? No more relying on regulatory agencies that can be filled up, as we're seeing right now, the regulatory agencies filled up by the very people that the agencies were supposed to control. But it was not only during the Trump administration. This has happened under every Democratic administration as well. We have to give back that power to ordinary citizens. And those ordinary citizens will be able to hear testimony from people all over the world who've been affected by the operations of that corporation. You get it? Okay, so that's point number 2. Point number 3 is, and if they are going to move their resources out of any particular area that they've been working in, they have to file an environmental and social impact report and then pay damages to the community that they're moving out of to the extent that they have hurt those communities. And finally, the fourth part of ESRA is requiring environmental education from every level, from kindergarten through graduate or in professional schools at the appropriate levels, so that everybody really understands that this planet is facing a major crisis, and that we have to fundamentally change. We have to educate people about that, so that's the fourth part. So this is the Environmental and Social Responsibility Amendment. This is what it would look like to have a new bottom line. Okay, here's the second part, second program of the Network of Spiritual Progressives. We're calling for a new understanding of what will get us homeland security. When people are worried about security, they are not crazy. There's a reason to worry about security. But the way to get security for the United States, we're saying, is to change the paradigm. The current paradigm is to say that the way you get security is through a strategy of domination. We're going to dominate either politically, militarily, economically, or through cultural penetration, or diplomatically. We're going to dominate as much of the world as we can. That's what will give us security. We are saying, no, in place of the strategy of domination, we want a strategy of generosity. The strategy of generosity manifested in a global and domestic Marshall Plan to once and for all end, not ameliorate, but end global and domestic poverty, homelessness, hunger, inadequate education, inadequate health care. Now, you see, these are both manifestations of the new bottom line. And by the way, I want to tell you that the Global Marshall Plan, and by the way, if you go to our website, you can read the new bottom line there. You can read the ESRA at tikkun.org, tikkun.org/ESRA, or the Global Marshall Plan at tikkun.org/GMP for Global Marshall Plan. The Global Marshall Plan program has been introduced several years in a row by Keith Ellison. And a shout out to Keith. Bernie mentioned his campaign last night, but there's something you can do. Keith Ellison was one of Bernie's key representatives on the platform committee of the Democratic National Convention. He's now running to be chair of the Democratic National Committee. And each of you comes from some district where there is a representative onto that Democratic National Committee. You got to find out who that is and call them up and say it matters to you to have somebody who represents the consciousness that Bernie spoke about last night, and that represents the Global Marshall Plan, because Keith has introduced the Global Marshall Plan resolution, and his office told me that they're going to reintroduce it today in honor of this event. Okay, so this is what it would look like. Now, how are we going to get there? How are we going to get there? So what's the strategy to get there? Well, in some obvious way, the strategy is this. Bernie started it last night by saying, look, you've got to recognize that there are many people who voted for Trump who are not racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, anti-Semitic. They went there for other reasons. And I want to talk a little bit about what those other reasons are, because Bernie started with the economic reasons, and he's entirely right about that. But I'm not only a rabbi, but also before I became a rabbi, I was a psychologist, and Tikkun was created by the Institute for Labor and Mental Health, and I'm the executive director of that. And we did a study, and we've continued to study the psychodynamics of American society. And those psychodynamic, and in particular, asking the question that was asked again by Reverend Barber today: why is it that people move to against their own economic self-interest? How could that happen? So we asked people, we started and we learned about people's lives, and we learned that people are in great pain in their lives. One dimension of it is the economic dimension, and that Bernie laid out beautifully. Let's stipulate, I'm not going to repeat them all, okay? Let's stipulate that all of the ways in which Bernie articulated last night are really significant and important to people. But we learned that there were other things that are critical to people's lives that aren't immediately apparent to those who have narrowly thought that, well, as the Democratic Party strategists put it, it's the economy, stupid. No, it turns out we discovered that there are other needs besides economic needs. And the two most important that we discovered were the need for some sense of self-respect and feeling that other people cared for them, number one, and number two, a sense of meaning and purpose in their lives. Now, why were these so important? Because they are systematically denied for most people in this society. In regard to and both of them have to do with the way the structure of the competitive marketplace is set up. You see, people spend all day, every day, in a world of work in which they are taught that the bottom line is money and power, and that their value is how much they can increase that. And they learn that they're surrounded by others who are looking out for number one. And eventually people, year after year, bombarded by this thinking, and that thinking reinforced by every sitcom, every television show, every political analysis that they hear. But even, that sense that everybody's out for themselves, looking to get more power or more something from somebody else, and that's the only rational way to be. That the only rational way to be is a maximizer of self-interest. Was people more and more absorb that. And by the way, you look at any of the little comedy shows for kids 4, 3, 4, 5 years old. It's about one animal beating up the other, or ridiculing, or who has more power than the other. Very, very, and just up to for the more sophisticated shows that we see from on television. They're all about who's going to win, who's going to have more power, who's going to have more control, or who's going to have more money. So we want to say, okay, that indoctrination eventually seeps in. So more and more people come away from the world of work thinking, hey, this is a world in which everybody's out for themselves, and I need to be out for myself. That's the only rational way to be. Now, what we learned about that is that, number one, that consciousness changes human relationships, undermines and weakens human relationships, because more and more people look at each other from the standpoint of, what's in it for me? What are you going to do for me? Even loving relationships, marriages, more and more people today enter into marriages in which they've unconsciously or consciously, some people consciously making lists about other people to decide who I want to make a commitment to, but more and more people looking at other people and saying, okay, amongst the people who are likely to fall for me in the short run, this one will fulfill more of my needs than anyone else. Okay? Now, you might say, what's wrong with that? That seems like a perfectly rational way to be. But the problem is that then when people enter into relationships of that sort, the relationships themselves the marriages become very unsteady. Why? Because you never know in a society where 50% of the marriages end in divorce, you never know whether your partner is at some point going to find somebody who might, in their belief system anyway, whether it's true or not, might satisfy more of their needs than you would. So there's a tremendous insecurity, whereas in the past there used to be a sense that, okay, you've got a partner, you're married, this is it. now people feel very insecure in those marriages. And the right came forward and said there's a crisis in the society, and it is a spiritual crisis. And the spiritual crisis is manifested in the insecurity in families. And guess what? Under this terrible bad news, they were correct. There is that crisis. But what the right did was to manipulate that and say, and you know where that's coming from? And then they would point to the demeaned others of the society and say, these people, whoever they are, okay? And so it was first Native Americans and African Americans, and then in the last 20 or 30 years, it's been all feminists, and then it became all gays and lesbians, and then it became immigrants. And they point to the demeaned others and say, these are the people who are introducing selfishness into the society. Okay? They're introducing selfishness because all they're doing is advancing their own agenda, their own particularist agenda, and they don't care for the collective. They don't care for the rest of us. Now, the truth is that there is a need for people caring for the collective, but as was so brilliantly put by the last speaker, for Black Lives Matter. Of course, all lives matter, but that's precisely why I want to fight for Black Lives Matter, right? But the point here that you want to understand is that it would have been easy for a liberal and progressive movement to turn around and say, you know where the insecurity comes from? From the core values of the capitalist marketplace that are teaching everybody to look out for number one and that the bottom line is money and power. That's where the insecurity comes from, and that's where... But they didn't do that. And here's the point that Bernie was dancing around but didn't say. The reason they don't do that is because a lot of the people at the top leadership of the Democratic Party are just as committed to the interests of the 1% as everybody else, as the other parties. So they have to avoid really addressing the way in which our economic system privileges selfishness, privileges materialism, privileges the worst values in the society, and they're not willing to go there. We have to be willing to go there. Do you see what I'm saying? We have to be able to challenge the values that are brought through the marketplace. But what did they do instead? Here's what they did. They said, oh, those people who are being attracted to the right, the only reason they're being attracted is because they're racist, they're sexist, homophobic, and et cetera, right? So that's a terrible, tragic error, because it turns out that many of those people were being attracted because the right was talking about a real problem with a crazy set of solutions, okay? And this is a general point that I want you to absorb. Whenever you see groups of people who are engaged in activities that are crazy or self-destructive, always ask yourself, instead of saying, let me find some nice put-down words to explain what's wrong with those people, instead, go here. Say, I need to see what are the real needs that underlie this behavior, and what are the false strategies that they are using. Separate the needs, the legitimate needs that people have, from the strategies that they've adopted to deal with those needs. Challenge the strategies. Challenge the strategies, but validate the needs. So this is core to the strategy that we need. The strategy for us now is to win away from Trumpism, that sector, or at least a part of that sector. Now, don't get me wrong. I definitely know that there's a sector of the Trump constituency that is racist, sexist, homophobic, and they've got them all represented in their cabinet and so forth. I know that, okay? Not denying that. Not denying the racism, sexism, homophobia, xenophobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, et cetera, that exists there. Okay? But they are not the totality of that group. And we would be able to change America if we just were able to win back the people who are not primarily coming through that part, if we spoke to their hearts and their needs. That is the strategy. That is a strategy that will work to change the society. But we can't do that unless the liberal and progressive forces change in a number of significant ways. I've mentioned the first one. We need to stop just to add on to our individual silos a shared vision of what we are for, not just what we are against. That's number one. Number two, we need to stop blaming and shaming the people who are not on our side. Do not assume that they are the evil ones and we are the good ones, okay? That is not a strategy to win. Okay, we want to, okay, in other words, let's say that you are convinced that the people are really screwed up, that they've gone in that direction. Fine, but we want to win, not just be right, okay? Do you know what I'm saying? We want to change the society. We are not doing any favor to the people who are being most screwed by this new administration if all we talk about is how bad the people in power are and keep on revealing it. Resistance is extremely important, but it is not a strategy to change. A strategy to change is one that wins people from the other side back to our side. So if you just see so think strategy. Think strategy. Yes, that doesn't mean I'm against demonstrations. On the contrary, I love those demonstrations. They're very, very valuable, okay? We have to challenge and oppose the policies. But there's a big difference between opposing the policies and putting down the people who articulate those policies or support those policies. A big difference, okay? We can see the humanity and affirm the humanity of many people who are backing destructive strategies and speak to them. So stop the shaming and the blaming. Now, why is the shaming and blaming so critical? Because of a second thing that we learned, which is that there's another element of the global capitalist society that has been internalized by huge numbers of people, and that is the false belief that we live in a meritocracy. And a meritocracy means a society in which those who have merit make it to the top, and those who aren't doing so well don't make it to the top. This idea that we are in a meritocracy leads people to a deep self-blaming. And one of the things that our study revealed, and by the way, I talk about this more in the article in the current issue of Tikkun, my essay, Tikkun. I hope you'll subscribe to Tikkun, but you'll get it for free if you join the network of spiritual progressives. You can get that at spiritualprogressives.org. But anyway, the meritocracy gets absorbed into people so deeply that they not only take that about their economic lives and say, well, if I'm not making it, it's because I didn't deserve it. I didn't work hard enough. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't something enough. Virtually, in the study that we did of thousands and thousands of middle-income working people, we found that almost every single person in the society has a secret story of why their lives aren't all that they should be, and they blame themselves for it. Almost everybody is holding a self-blaming story. So that is tremendously disempowering. And by the way, here's a problem with some of the pop psychology and pop spirituality. When the pop psychology and pop spirituality says, you make your own reality, that reinforces the self-blaming for huge numbers of people, okay? Because the truth of the matter is that we may make our own reality, but within circumstances that we didn't choose and over which we don't have a great deal of power until we get together to change that. There is an economic structure. There's a political structure. We didn't choose this, and it's not our fault that it's there. So, but most people internalize the self-blaming and say, oh, well, if I'm in a society, I can't find a partner who isn't just looking out for themselves. That's not because something is wrong with you. That's because there's something wrong with the society that's been educating people to believe that the only way to be rational is to be a maximizer of self-interest. See what I'm saying? So people feel like it's really hard to find the appropriate partner. That's not your fault. That's the fault of a social order that doesn't actually encourage people to be loving and instead encourages them to be looking out for number one. Okay, these are a lot of ideas that I'm pouring out very quickly, and that you can read about. My book, which was a national bestseller when it first came out, The Left Hand of God, Taking Back Our Country from the Religious Right. The Left Hand of God is on sale outside, and if you can also get it online, you can order it from, well, wherever. Yeah. But that lays it out in more detail. But you'll also find it when you go to tikkun.org and look at our sliding show at the top of tikkun.org. They have my fuller exposition, at least a part of this, of overcoming Trumpism. So, okay, so I'm putting out, I want to say to you here, there are these things that we can do, but we need to think more deeply and challenge. So what's the way to challenge? Okay, we need to develop, okay, wait, there's a third problem in the liberal and progressive world that I forgot to mention. Okay, and that is, and I know it's not here in this room, but it's another thing that you can help us with by going into the liberal and progressive institutions and challenging them there. Okay, 5 minutes, okay, I got it. And that is a pervasive religiophobia in the liberal and progressive world. Now, you may not recognize it. A lot of people in the liberal and progressive world don't recognize it, just like before there was the women's movement, most people didn't recognize the sexism. Before there was a gay and lesbian movement, most people didn't recognize the homophobia. There is deep, deep prejudice against religious and spiritual consciousness in a great section of the liberal and social change movements. I learned about this from the people who we were interviewing, who told us that they would go, that they originally, as I said, for economic interest, they were going to liberal and progressive meetings. And what they would hear there was a message that said something like this: we would like you religious people, and by the way, 60% of Americans still claim to be going to some religious service at least once a month. 70% say they believe in God. So you want to make a democratic transformation of America? You've got to stop the religiophobia. But what they told us is they go to in those contexts and they hear people talking, not the speakers, not the official, but in the culture of the liberal and progressive world, they hear people saying stuff that essentially goes like this: we want you to be here in our demonstrations. We want you to vote for our candidates. But basically, we think you're at a lower level of psychological development if you still need some God figure in your life or some of this religious stuff. You actually are not as smart as the rest of us, but if you hang out with us long enough, we hope you will evolve to the higher level that the rest of us are on. Okay? This is a part of the culture that, so, I mean, when I was talking about this, when my book became a national bestseller, I had many different times, but I'll just give one example. A woman gets up and asks me a question, or tells me, makes a comment. She says, this guy I was really interested in called me up and asked me if I could go out for a walk with him on Sunday morning. And I said, I can't. I go to church Sunday morning. He said, you go to church? I thought you were a liberal. Okay, that is so pervasive, and I know it doesn't ring a bell immediately to you, but go into liberal or progressive movements, and you'll hear it over and over again in the culture, not in the official documents or anything like that. We have to challenge the religiophobia. It's first of all, it's wrong, but secondly, it's also destructive to our ability to reach out to the majority of Americans who take their religion seriously. And when you put down their religion, they feel that you are basically saying that you are inferior, that they are inferior. So over and over again, the self-blaming that they got from the meritocracy and from the larger society is getting reinforced by the messages given by the liberal and progressive world. We're saying, and why don't we take that on? Well, in part because so many people in the liberal and progressive world actually believe there is a meritocracy. They actually believe, wait a second, I'm more successful in my life because I'm smarter. I'm more together than these other people. We have to challenge that. So we've set up a training for how to be an activist in moving into those communities. We need to create a tribe, an empathy tribe of hundreds of thousands of people who will go into neighborhoods of the red states and the red counties in your own state, even if you're from a blue state, and talk to people with an empathic consciousness. But to get to that point, we have to first work on that empathy tribe needs to go into the liberal and progressive world and change the culture enough so that people are not over and over again hearing the kind of message that was symbolized by Hillary Clinton saying that 50% of the Trump supporters are a bundle of deplorables, okay? Because that makes people feel terrible and makes them feel angry at you. How can you look down on me all the time? Instead, we should be affirming their humanity and then welcoming them into a different kind of movement. So we're doing a training. I'll just finish here. If you're interested in learning, we have 100 people who are going through the current version of the training, but you can learn more about it, and you can do it online wherever you live. It's CAT, C-A-T. She spoke this morning on the panel, the religion panel, cat at spiritualprogressives.org. And if you email her, she'll tell you how to become part of the next training as soon as we set the date for that. The training is a step in the direction of building an empathy tribe of hundreds of thousands of people who can first change the culture in the liberal and progressive world, and secondly, change how we are perceived in the rest of the world. So this is the path to build the love revolution. We need a love revolution, and this is the way to do it. We need to be not just repeat the word love, but also affirm a whole vision of a world based on love. Now, if you very last point, if you think I'm being unrealistic, you're probably right, because what the word realistic has come to mean is what the people with power and the people in the media and even liberal politicians will tell you is realistic, because they're accepting realism based on their framework of what can be actually changed immediately within the context of the power arrangements that we have. So to believe in God, from my standpoint, Kat talked about it this morning, is to believe there is something in the universe. There is a power in this universe that makes possible the transformation from that which is to that which ought to be. So I want to say to you as my final words here, don't be realistic, okay? Do not waste the rest of your time on this planet giving money, giving energy to programs that are partial but aren't really what you really believe in, but you've been told, no, this is practical and it'll work. Instead, use the time that you have on this planet to go for your highest vision of the good. That new bottom line may be it. I hope you'll join with us. Stay strong and go for your highest vision. Thank you so much.